The vampire king rejected 1,000 brides until the poor girl bled on his cold throne. Blood had never looked so vibrant against black stone. Seraphon Havel, king of the eternal court, watched the crimson droplets slide down the armrest of his throne with something approaching interest. For the first time in 3 tedious hours, he felt awake. The girl on her hands and knees before him clutched her palm to her chest, her face pale with mortification rather than pain. She'd been scrubbing the dais steps when the last rejected bride had swept past in a fury of silk and wounded pride, knocking the girl's bucket over. The water had made the obsidian slick. One wrong step, one desperate grab for balance, and her hand had met the throne's sharp edge. Now her blood decorated his seat of power, and every noble in the hall had gone silent. "Don't just kneel there," Seraphon said, his voice carrying easily through the cavernous chamber. "You're bleeding on my floor as well." The girl's head snapped up. Her eyes were wide and dark, framed by a tangle of brown hair that had escaped its simple braid. She was perhaps 20, dressed in the plain gray uniform of the palace kitchen staff, and she looked at him with something he hadn't seen all night, annoyance rather than calculation. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," she said, her tone suggesting she found the title cumbersome. "I was ordered to clean during the selection ceremony. I didn't realize the rejected candidates would be quite so aggressive in their exits." A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. The sound echoed strangely in the silent hall. Behind the girl, his advisor Lord Calum stiffened, his white hair practically bristling with disapproval. 200 years as the king's counselor, and the vampire still couldn't learn to relax. "What's your name?" Seraphon asked. "Winona Zahar, Your Majesty." She was still holding her bleeding hand, but she'd straightened her spine. Pride, he noted, hidden under deference but present nonetheless. "Well, Winona Zahar, you've accomplished something remarkable tonight." He gestured lazily at the empty hall, at the abandoned chairs where hopeful fathers and scheming mothers had sat. "You've drawn my attention when 1,000 noble daughters could not." "I apologize for that as well," she said dryly. "I'll try to bleed more quietly next time." Another laugh. This was delightful. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him without weighing every word for advantage. He rose from his throne, a fluid movement that reminded everyone present exactly what he was. The vampires in the hall tracked his motion with the stillness of predators. The few human nobles shifted nervously. He descended the dais steps, his boots silent on stone. Even slouching, he stood a head taller than most, his white hair falling past his shoulders, his skin the pale shade that marked his kind. In the modern world, vampires had learned to blend, to hide, to negotiate. But in their own halls, in their own courts, they wore their nature proudly. His black suit was cut in a style 3 centuries old, updated just enough to acknowledge the current era. Power, his mother had taught him, was as much about presentation as strength. He stopped in front of Winona. She tilted her head back to meet his gaze, and he saw her throat move as she swallowed, but she didn't look away. "Let me see," he said, reaching for her hand. She hesitated. For a moment he thought she might refuse, and that interested him even more. Then she slowly extended her injured palm. The cut wasn't deep, but it was clean, still welling blood. He could smell it, rich and warm, carrying notes of iron and something else, something that made his centuries-old hunger stir, not for blood, but for the mystery of her. "You need stitches," he said, "and I need a bride." Her eyes widened. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me." He released her hand and turned to address the hall. "Lord Calum, cancel the remaining selection ceremonies. I've made my choice." The hall erupted. Vampires and humans alike surged to their feet, voices rising in protest, in shock, in barely concealed rage. Seraphon ignored them all. He was looking at Winona, who had gone very still. "You can't be serious," she said quietly. "I'm always serious." That was a lie, but she didn't need to know that yet. The ancient law is clear. I must wed before the blood moon, which rises in 30 days, or I forfeit my crown to the next legitimate claimant. I've rejected every noble candidate because I could smell the ambition on them like cheap perfume. You want nothing from me except perhaps an apology for ruining your evening. That makes you perfect. I'm a kitchen worker, Winona said. I'm nobody. You're bleeding on my throne. That's more of a claim than any of them had. Lord Calum had reached the dais, his ancient face twisted with concern. Your Majesty, a moment of your time. In private. Seraphon waved a dismissive hand. Speak, we're all family here. She's human, Calum hissed. Common-born. No title, no lands, no political value whatsoever. The noble houses will revolt. They'll complain, Seraphon corrected. There's a difference. Besides, the law says I must marry. It doesn't specify whom. The council will never accept this. The council can lodge their complaints formally, and I'll ignore them formally. That's how this works. He looked back at Winona, who was watching the exchange with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're very quiet. I'm thinking, she said. About what? Whether you're actually insane or just very bored. He grinned. Can it be both? She stood slowly, cradling her bleeding hand. She was shorter than the noble women who'd paraded past earlier, her frame slim from what he suspected was need rather than fashion. But she held herself like someone who'd learned to take up space in a world that preferred she didn't. I don't want to be queen, she said clearly. Good. I don't want to be king most days. We'll suffer together. That's not an answer. That's not even a proper proposal. You want romance? He spread his arms wide. I can arrange romance. Roses, poetry, a string quartet playing something appropriately melancholy. But it won't change the reality. I need a bride in 30 days, and every noble woman in 5 kingdoms comes with strings attached. You're the first person I've met tonight who isn't trying to manipulate me. I don't even know you, Winona protested. You will. We have a month. This is insane. Yes, but it's also happening. He turned back to Calum. Summon the court physician to tend Miss Zahar's hand. Prepare the Western guest suite for her use. Inform the noble houses that the selection is complete. Your Majesty. That's an order, Calum. The old vampire's jaw tightened, but he bowed stiffly and withdrew. The other nobles were filtering out, their expressions ranging from shocked to furious. Seraphon could already hear the whispers starting, the plots forming. Let them scheme. He'd been dealing with vampire politics for 6 centuries. They'd need to be far more creative than he expected to actually threaten him. He looked back at Winona. She hadn't moved, still standing on the dais with blood dripping from her fingers. The defiance had drained from her face, leaving exhaustion and confusion. Come, he said gently. Let's get that hand treated. Then we can discuss how much you want to throttle me. I don't want to throttle you, she said. Really? I'm disappointed. I want to wake up and discover this was a stress dream brought on by working a triple shift, but she followed him as he walked toward the side entrance, away from the dispersing crowd. Why me? Truly, this will cause you nothing but trouble. Trouble is the only thing keeping me interested in immortality, he said. Then more seriously, you're right that this will complicate things. The noble houses expected one of their own. There are alliances riding on this marriage, treaties that depend on my choice. By selecting you, I've upset a very delicate balance of power. Then why do it? He paused at the doorway, considering his answer. The truth was complex, tied up in centuries of obligation and performance, of being a symbol before being a person. But she'd asked him honestly, and she deserved something real in return. Because I'm tired, he said simply. Tired of games, of calculated smiles, of women who see a crown before they see me. You looked at me like I was a particularly inconvenient obstacle between you and finishing your work. Do you know how refreshing that is? She studied his face, and he let her look. Let her see past the regal bearing and ancient power to whatever kernel of sincerity he could still access after 600 years. You're going to regret this, she said finally. Probably, but it'll be interesting. The physician's chambers were in the eastern wing, far from the throne room and its lingering tension. Winona sat in uncomfortable silence while a vampire doctor who looked no older than 30, but was likely older than the building, stitched her palm with practiced efficiency. Seraphon watched from across the room, his posture relaxed, but his gaze intent. "The wound is clean," the physician said, his voice carrying the formal cadence of old blood. "It will heal without complication, though I recommend avoiding manual labor for at least a week." "That's going to be difficult given my job," Winona said. "You don't have that job anymore," Seraphon said. "You're consort-elect to the crown. Your duties have changed somewhat." The physician's hands didn't falter on the stitching, but Winona saw his eyes widen fractionally. News traveled fast in the palace, apparently, but maybe not that fast. "Congratulations, miss," the physician murmured, tying off the thread. "Thank you," Winona said automatically. Then, when they were alone again, "I didn't agree to this." "No, you didn't. That's concerning, actually. I'm usually better at reading situations." Seraphon crossed to the window, gazing out at the city below. The palace sat at the heart of Nethermere, the hidden vampire city beneath modern London. Above them, humans went about their lives unaware of the ancient kingdom in the depths below. "But I need you to understand the position I'm in. The blood moon rises in 30 days. If I'm not wed by then, my claim to the throne passes to my cousin, Seraphon Havel. Seraphon believes the old ways are the only ways. He thinks vampires should rule openly, that humans are cattle, that mercy is weakness. And you don't believe that? I believe survival requires adaptation. The world has changed. We change with it or we die. Seraphon would start a war we can't win." He turned back to her. "I've held this throne for 3 centuries specifically to prevent men like him from taking power. But the law is the law. If I don't marry, I lose everything I've built." Winona flexed her bandaged hand carefully. "So marry someone useful, someone with an army or political connections. Why throw that away on me?" "Because every useful marriage comes with a knife pointed at my back. Lady Thesara of House Morvain, her family wants to control the council. Lady Ivanthe of House Salor, she's Seraphon's spy. I spent 3 hours tonight looking into the eyes of women who want me dead or controlled." He moved closer, his expression earnest. "You're not useful. That makes you the only safe choice. That's the most depressing proposal I've ever heard. Have you had many proposals?" "None. Which makes this the worst by default." She stood, cradling her hand. "What happens if I refuse, truly?" His expression went carefully neutral. "I marry someone else, someone dangerous. Seraphon likely orchestrates my death within a year. The court falls into chaos. But you go back to your life, and none of it is your concern." She wanted to say yes, wanted to walk out of this gilded cage and return to her tiny room in the servants' quarters, to her simple life of hard work and small pleasures. But she'd seen his face when he'd mentioned his cousin, had heard the weight in his voice when he'd talked about holding the throne for 3 centuries. "I need to think," she said. "You have until morning. That's when the formal announcement goes out." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I won't let anyone hurt you. Whatever you decide, you're under my protection now. The moment your blood touched my throne, you became important. The noble houses will see you as a threat, and I won't allow them to act on that." "I was safer when I was nobody," Winona said quietly. "Yes, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry I met you." He left before she could respond, the door closing with a soft click. Winona stood alone in the physician's chamber, her hand throbbing, her mind racing. She thought about her life in the kitchens, the early mornings and late nights, the way her back ached after 12-hour shifts, the tiny wages that barely covered her rent in the servants' quarters. But she'd been free. Poor, but free. Now she was trapped in something she couldn't begin to understand, and the only person who could release her was the one who'd trapped her in the first place. She looked down at her bandaged palm, such a small cut to change everything. The Western guest suite was larger than the entire apartment she'd shared with her mother before the woman's death 3 years ago. Winona walked through rooms filled with furniture that cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, her footsteps muffled by carpets that probably had historical significance. A wardrobe stood open, already filled with clothes in her size. Someone had worked quickly. She found a nightgown that seemed least likely to be priceless and changed mechanically. The bed was absurdly soft. She lay there staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across painted frescoes of pastoral scenes, vampires pretending to remember sunlight. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion dragged her under eventually. She dreamed of blood on black stone, of white-haired kings with ancient eyes, of crowns that were really cages. She woke to knocking. Pale light filtered through the curtained windows. Artificial light, she realized. There was no true sun this far underground. Someone had engineered the palace to mimic the day-night cycle for the human servants. "Come in," she called, sitting up. A vampire woman entered, her movements precise and elegant. She wore the formal attire of palace staff, her white hair bound in an intricate braid. Her ageless face showed polite deference, but her eyes were assessing. "Miss Zahar, I am Varel, assigned as your personal attendant. His Majesty has requested your presence for breakfast if you're amenable. Do I have a choice?" The faintest hint of amusement touched Varel's features. "Of course. You may also choose to throw yourself from the balcony, flee the palace through the sewers, or barricade yourself in this suite indefinitely. His Majesty was quite specific that you are a guest, not a prisoner." Despite everything, Winona smiled. "Breakfast sounds better than the sewers." "An excellent decision, miss." Varel helped her dress in clothing far finer than anything she'd worn before. The fabric felt like water against her skin, the fit perfect in a way that suggested supernatural talent or magic. Probably both. Her bandaged hand made the process awkward, but Varel worked around it with practiced ease. "May I speak freely, miss?" Varel asked as she arranged Winona's hair. "Please. The king has been restless for many years, since before I came to court, and I've served for 50 years. He performs his duties admirably, but there's been a loneliness to him. Last night was the first time I've seen him genuinely engaged." She met Winona's eyes in the mirror. "I don't know if his choice was wise, but I know it was real." "Everyone keeps talking about choice," Winona said, "but I haven't actually made one yet. Haven't you?" Varel secured a final pin. "You're still here." Breakfast was served in a private dining room that overlooked the vast cavern housing the city. Seraphon stood by the windows, his profile sharp against the artificial morning light. He'd changed into more modern clothing, dark trousers and a simple shirt, though the antique quality to his bearing remained. "You came," he said, turning as she entered, turning as she. "Apparently I chose sewers over suicide, so breakfast seemed reasonable by comparison." He laughed, the sound warm and surprised. "I like you more by the hour. Come, sit. The food is human appropriate, I promise. We do keep a kitchen for the mortal staff." The table was laden with more food than she could eat in a week. Fresh fruit that must have cost a fortune this far underground. Pastries that smelled like heaven. Coffee that actually tasted good, not like the bitter sludge served in the servants' cafeteria. "This is excessive," she said. "I'm a king. Excess is rather the point." He poured her coffee with surprising domesticity. "Though I'll admit I don't usually pay much attention to food, it's wasted on me. Tell me what you like and I'll ensure it's available." She took a careful sip of coffee. "Why are you being nice to me?" "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because I'm a complication in your political crisis. An inconvenience you're stuck with because you made an impulsive decision." "You're not an inconvenience." He set down the coffee pot and regarded her seriously. "You're a person I've dragged into a dangerous situation. The least I can do is offer decent coffee." She studied him across the table. In the morning light, artificial though it was, he looked younger than he had in the throne room, less regal, more real. She could see the weariness he tried to hide, the weight of centuries in eyes that had seen too much. "Tell me about the blood moon," she said. "What happens if you don't marry?" "The law is ancient, written when the Eternal Court was founded 2,000 years ago. A king must have a consort to rule. It's about succession, about stability, about ensuring the crown passes securely. If I fail to wed before the blood moon, my claim is forfeit. The crown passes to the next legitimate heir. Your cousin? Draven, yes. He's been waiting for this moment for decades, probably arranged for the law to be enforced now, though I can't prove it. Seraphon leaned back in his chair. He has support among the old families, the ones who missed the days when we hunted openly, when humans knew to fear us. How did it used to be? Winona asked. Before the hiding? Brutal, glorious, unsustainable. He gazed out at the underground city. We ruled through terror for millennia. Humans were prey, sometimes pets, never partners. But humanity evolved. They built weapons, formed armies, learned to fight back. 300 years ago, we faced a choice: adapt or face extinction. Most of us chose survival. We went underground, literally and figuratively, built cities like Nethermere in the spaces humans don't look, integrated into their world carefully. Now we coexist, and both species are stronger for it. But some vampires disagree. Draven and his followers believe we betrayed our nature, that we should have fought instead of fled. They want to return to the old ways, damn the consequences. Winona broke apart a pastry, her mind working through the implications. So if Draven takes the throne, he starts a war. He starts a genocide. Humans outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Modern weapons would obliterate us within years. But Draven doesn't see that. He sees only lost glory. And you're all that stands between him and power. Me and my deeply inappropriate bride choice, yes. He met her eyes. I know what I'm asking of you. It's too much. You didn't ask for any of this. But I'm asking anyway, because I'm desperate, and you're the only person in this entire kingdom I trust right now. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. She'd spent her whole life invisible, scrubbing floors and washing dishes, noticed only when she made mistakes. Now a king was asking her to save his kingdom. I'm not qualified, she said. I don't know politics or protocol or any of the things a queen should know. You can learn. I'll teach you. The nobles will despise me. They despise me half the time. You'll fit right in. This is insane. You keep saying that. I'm starting to think you mean it as a yes. She wanted to say no, wanted to run back to her safe, small life. But she kept seeing his face when he'd talked about his cousin, kept hearing the quiet desperation under his casual tone. And beneath that, if she was honest, she felt the pull of something she'd never experienced before. Someone needed her, not her labor, not her service, but her specifically. If I do this, she said slowly, I have conditions. His expression brightened. Name them. I want to know what I'm walking into. No more secrets, no more politics I don't understand. You teach me everything. Agreed. I want protection for my friends, the other kitchen workers. If the nobles come after me, they might target anyone I was close to. Done. I'll assign guards. And I want... She hesitated, not sure how to phrase it. I want this to be real, not just political theater. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to stand beside you, I need to know you're actually there, not just playing a part. Something shifted in his expression, softened. I can promise you that. The crown I wear by necessity, but anything between us will be real. She took a breath. This was madness. This was throwing her life off a cliff and hoping someone caught her. But maybe madness was better than safety. Then I'll do it, she said. I'll marry you. The smile that crossed his face was radiant. He stood, crossed to her side of the table, and took her unbandaged hand. Thank you. Truly, you have no idea what this means. I'm starting to get an idea. She looked down at their joined hands. His skin was cool to the touch, but not cold. Alive, just differently. So what happens now? Now we make it official. Announcement to the court, meetings with the council, probably several attempts on your life by this evening. The usual. You're joking. I wish I were, but I meant what I said. I'll keep you safe. The formal announcement took place in the throne room at midday. Winona stood beside Seraphon on the dais, dressed in clothing Varel had selected, feeling like an imposter in expensive fabric. The room was packed with vampires and human nobles, their faces ranging from curious to outraged. Lord Calum read the proclamation in a voice that suggested he'd rather be reading a death sentence, his own preferably. By royal decree, let it be known throughout the Eternal Court and all subordinate territories that His Majesty King Seraphon Havel has chosen his consort. Miss Winona Zahar of Nethermere shall be elevated to the rank of Princess Consort with all attendant rights and privileges. The wedding shall take place on the night of the blood moon, as prescribed by ancient law. The room erupted. Voices rose in protest, in question, in barely concealed fury. Seraphon let them rage for a moment, his hand warm on the small of Winona's back. Then he stepped forward, and the crowd fell silent with the weight of his presence. "I understand this is unexpected," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly. "I understand many of you had hopes for a different outcome, but my choice is made, and it is final. Miss Zahar has accepted my proposal, and she will be your queen." A vampire woman stepped forward from the crowd, her white hair elaborately styled, her gown worth a year of Winona's former wages. She was beautiful in the sharp way of predators, all elegant edges and calculated grace. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned wine. "Surely this is premature. The young woman is human, common-born, completely unprepared for the responsibilities of the crown. Perhaps a longer courtship is warranted. Time to educate her in our ways." "Lady Thessera," Seraphon said, and there was an edge to his tone now. "I appreciate your concern. I don't require your permission." "Of course not, Your Majesty. But the council exists to advise me, not command me. My choice stands." Another voice rose from the back of the room, male, deep, carrying the weight of old power. "And what of those of us who find this choice insulting? What of tradition?" The crowd parted, and a vampire who could only be Seraphon Havel walked forward. He looked like Seraphon might if Seraphon were carved from ice instead of stone. Same white hair, same regal bearing, but where Seraphon's eyes held warmth beneath the authority, Draven's were empty of anything but ambition. "Cousin," Seraphon said coolly, "how good of you to join us. I wouldn't miss this historic moment. The king who rejected 1,000 noble brides to wed a kitchen girl." Draven's smile was a razor. "Though I wonder if you've considered the implications. The noble houses united in support of your reign because they believed they had a stake in your rule. You've just told them they're irrelevant." "I've told them I won't be manipulated through marriage. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I stand, you've just destabilized the entire power structure of the court. Some might call that reckless, others might call it grounds for removal." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Winona felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Beside her, Seraphon had gone very still, his casual demeanor burning away to reveal the ancient power beneath. "Are you challenging my right to rule, Draven?" "I'm observing that a king who makes such poor decisions might not be fit to lead." Draven's gaze slid to Winona, and she felt the weight of his attention like ice water down her spine. "No offense intended to you, Miss Zahar. I'm sure you're a lovely person, but you're out of your depth, and everyone in this room knows it." "Then everyone in this room can adjust their expectations," Winona said, and was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I didn't ask to be here, but I am here, and I'm not going anywhere." Silence fell. Draven's eyebrows rose fractionally. Then he smiled, and it was worse than his threats had been. "Charming. She has spirit. I hope she lives long enough to maintain it." He bowed to Seraphon with mocking formality. "Congratulations, cousin. I'm sure the wedding will be memorable." He withdrew, the crowd parting before him, but the damage was done. The lines were drawn. Winona could feel the tension thrumming through the room, could see the calculation in every face. Seraphon took her hand. His grip was firm, reassuring. "The ceremony is concluded. Return to your duties or leisure as you see fit. Miss Zahar and I have much to discuss." They left through the side entrance again, escaping the crowd. But this time Winona could feel eyes following them, could sense the danger coalescing in their wake. "I'm sorry," Seraphon said once they were alone in the corridor. "Draven's always been dramatic, but that was more direct than I expected. He threatened me. He threatened both of us, But yes, he made his intentions clear. Seraphon ran a hand through his white hair, disrupting its perfect fall. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid, but at least now we know where everyone stands. Standing in a place where your cousin wants us dead isn't very comforting. No, it's not. But we have 30 days to solidify your position, to win enough support that Draven can't move against us openly. And we will. I promise you that. She wanted to believe him. But she'd seen the faces in that crowd, had felt the weight of their judgment. She was an outsider, an interloper, and they'd made it clear she wasn't welcome. Teach me, she said. Everything. If I'm going to survive this, I need to know how your world works. His expression softened. Then we start now. The next week was a blur of lessons and protocols, of learning to navigate a world she'd only ever observed from the outside. Seraphon was true to his word. He spent hours each day teaching her the intricacies of vampire society, the web of alliances and enmities that governed the court. She learned that vampire politics were older and more complex than human governments, that every gesture had meaning, every word was weighted with implications. That power flowed through bloodlines that stretched back millennia, and respect was earned through age and accomplishment. She learned the names of the major houses: House Morvain, wealthy and ambitious, led by the cunning Lady Thessera; House Salore, ancient and traditional, allied with Draven; House Valen, merchants and traders who preferred profit to politics; House Karth, warriors who valued strength above all. She learned that as consort-elect, her every move would be scrutinized, every word analyzed for weakness. And she learned that Seraphon was a better teacher than she'd expected. He was patient with her mistakes, encouraging when she struggled, and genuinely pleased when she succeeded. He made her laugh when the lessons grew tedious, challenged her when she started to doubt herself, and never once made her feel stupid for not knowing things she'd had no opportunity to learn. "You're doing well," he said one evening, watching her navigate a formal greeting with Lord Valen, the merchant house patriarch. "Better than well. You're a natural." "I feel like an actor in a play I haven't read," Winona said once the Lord had withdrawn. They were in one of the palace gardens, a vast underground space lit by magical lights that mimicked starlight. "Everyone else knows their lines and I'm improvising. Acting is half of court life. The other half is knowing when to stop." He plucked a white flower from a nearby vine, offering it to her. "You're honest. That's rare here. It's also your greatest weapon." She took the flower, twirling it between her fingers. "How is honesty a weapon?" "Because no one knows how to defend against it. They're expecting manipulation, calculation, hidden agendas. When you speak plainly, it throws them off balance." He paused, then added quietly, "It certainly threw me off balance." "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is, trust me." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following stone paths between beds of plants that probably shouldn't exist this far from the sun. But vampire magic, Seraphon had explained, could coax life from unlikely places. "Can I ask you something?" Winona said. "About being a vampire?" "Anything. Do you miss it? The sun, I mean. The real sky." He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, though the memory fades with time. I was turned 600 years ago, and even then the turning process clouds your human memories. But sometimes I dream of warmth on my face, of light that doesn't come from magic or artifice. It's the price we pay for immortality." "Is it worth it? Ask me in another 600 years. But there was sadness in his voice, a weariness that made her chest ache. She thought about her own mortality, about the limited time she had compared to his endless years. "What happens to me? After we marry, I mean. Do I just grow old while you stay the same?" "There are options," he said carefully. "The turning, if you wanted it. You could become vampire, live as long as I do. And if I don't want that, then you live as a human, and I cherish every moment I have with you." He stopped, turning to face her. "I won't lie, Winona. The thought of watching you age and die while I remain unchanged is painful. But it's your choice. Always your choice. I won't take that from you." The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. Somewhere in the past week, between lessons and conversations and quiet moments like this, something had shifted. She'd started to see past the crown, past the ancient power, to the person beneath, and what she found there drew her in ways she hadn't expected. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "This time last week I was worried about making rent. Now I'm discussing immortality with a vampire king. It's a lot." "It is, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry you're here." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. "You've become important to me, more than I expected." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "Seraphon." An explosion rocked the garden. The ground heaved beneath their feet, throwing them both forward. Seraphon caught her, his arms iron strong, as debris rained down around them. The magical lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. "Stay down," Seraphon commanded, his voice sharp with authority. Then, louder, "Guards!" Light bloomed as vampires arrived, their own bodies generating an eerie phosphorescence. Winona saw the damage in flashes, a crater where the path had been, plants obliterated, stone walls cracked and crumbling. "Bomb," one of the guards reported, his expression grim. "Planted beneath the main path. Time to detonate." "When we'd be walking here," Seraphon finished. His arms were still around Winona, protective. "Someone knew our routine. The palace is compromised, Your Majesty. We need to move you to secure quarters." Seraphon nodded sharply. He helped Winona to her feet, checking her for injuries with quick efficiency. "Are you hurt?" "No, shaken but whole." She looked at the crater, at how close they'd been standing. "That was meant to kill us." "Kill you," he corrected grimly. "I'd survive a blast like that, you wouldn't. Someone just declared war." The secure quarters were in the palace's heart, rooms carved from solid stone with only one entrance. Seraphon paced like a caged wolf while Lord Calum delivered reports. Winona sat on an overstuffed sofa, her hands trembling with delayed shock. "The device was sophisticated," Calum was saying. "Vampire-made, designed to bypass our security wards. Someone with access to the palace planted it." "Draven," Seraphon said flatly. "We can't prove it." "We don't need to prove it. Everyone knows." He slammed a fist against the stone wall hard enough to crack it. "He's escalating. I didn't think he'd move this quickly. He's testing our defenses, and he's making a statement." Calum glanced at Winona. "That she's vulnerable." "Then we make her less vulnerable," Seraphon said. "Double her guard. No more public appearances until the wedding. And I want every member of the palace staff vetted again. Anyone with even tangential connections to Draven's faction is removed. That will leave us short-staffed. I don't care. I want her safe." Winona found her voice. "I should leave." Both vampires turned to stare at her. "If I'm the target, then my being here puts everyone at risk. I should go. Disappear. You can tell the court I changed my mind. Find someone else to marry." The words hurt to say, but they made sense. She was the weak point in Seraphon's armor. Without her, he could make a better choice. "No," Seraphon said, the word absolute. "Be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You leaving doesn't solve anything. Draven doesn't want you gone. He wants me weakened, distracted, vulnerable. If you flee, it proves he can intimidate us. It invites more attacks." He crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. "And more than that, I don't want you to go. I know that's selfish. I know I'm asking you to stay in danger. But please, stay." She looked into his eyes, saw the fear there beneath the determination. Fear for her. When had she become someone worth his fear? "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Relief flooded his features. He took her hands, mindful of her still healing palm. "I won't let them hurt you. I swear it. You can't promise that. Watch me." The next 3 weeks were tense. Winona remained confined to the secure quarters, seeing only Seraphon, Varel, and a rotation of carefully vetted guards. She continued her lessons, but the easy camaraderie that had developed between her and Seraphon was strained by the constant threat hanging over them. He threw himself into preparations, working 18-hour days to shore up support among the noble houses, to counter Draven's political maneuvering, to plan a wedding that would also serve as a demonstration of power. She saw the toll it took on him, the weariness that crept into his eyes, the tightness in his shoulders that never quite eased. He was fighting on too many fronts, and she hated that she couldn't help. "Let me do something," she said one night when he'd returned to the quarters late, exhausted. "I'm going mad sitting here. You're staying alive. That's enough." "It's not. Seraphon, you're killing yourself trying to protect me and manage the court and counter Draven. Let me help. Teach me how." He sank into the chair across from her, rubbing his face. "It's too dangerous. It's already dangerous. At least let me be useful while I'm in danger." He laughed despite himself. "You're stubborn. You chose me. That's on you." Something in his expression shifted, warmed. "I did, didn't I? Best decision I've made in decades." Her breath caught. The air between them felt suddenly charged, full of things unsaid. Over the past weeks, through lessons and conversations and shared meals, something real had grown. Not the political necessity that had brought them together, but genuine connection, affection that was deepening into something more. "Seraphon," she said softly. He moved before she could finish the thought, crossed the space between them and cupped her face in his cool hands. "Tell me to stop. Don't stop." He kissed her, gentle at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away, but she didn't want to pull away. She leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, and kissed him back with all the fear and longing and desperate hope that had been building inside her. The kiss deepened, his arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt the careful control he maintained crack just slightly. Felt the want beneath his regal bearing, the loneliness of 600 years searching for connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't plan this," he said. "Neither did I. But I'm glad it happened." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "You've become essential to me, not just as a political solution, but as yourself. Winona, I—" The door burst open. Lord Calum stood there, his ancient face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty, the Council has called an emergency session. They're demanding your presence." "Now?" "Immediately. Draven has leveled charges against you. Incompetence, reckless endangerment of the court, violation of the succession laws." Calum's voice was tight. "He's calling for an immediate transfer of power." Seraphon's expression went cold and hard. "He's staging a coup." "Yes, and he has enough support to make it legal. You need to address the council now, or you'll lose the throne tonight." Winona felt ice settle in her stomach. "Go. I can't leave you unguarded. I have Varel and the guards. Go. Fight for your throne." She squeezed his hand. "I'll be here when you get back." He kissed her once more, quick and fierce. "I'm holding you to that." Then he was gone, striding out with Calum, leaving Winona alone with her fears. The emergency council session was held in the ancient chamber beneath the palace, a cavernous space carved from living rock before recorded history. Seraphon entered to find the full council assembled. 12 vampires of supreme age and power, representatives of the oldest bloodlines, and standing before them like a prosecutor, Draven Hale. "Cousin," Draven said with false warmth, "thank you for joining us. You didn't give me much choice." Seraphon took his place at the center of the circular chamber, the council arrayed around him in judgment. "What are these charges, Draven?" "Simply put, you're unfit to rule. You've rejected centuries of tradition to marry a human commoner with no political value. You've destabilized the noble houses and insulted every vampire family that offered you their daughters. You've made us vulnerable, and vulnerability is something we cannot afford. I've made a choice that doesn't serve your ambitions. There's a difference." "Have you?" Lady Thesara spoke from her council seat, her voice measured. "Because from where we sit, you've thrown away every advantage for a romantic whim. The girl has no training, no bloodline, no allies. She makes you weaker, not stronger." "She makes me honest," Seraphon said. "Every bride you offered me came with strings attached. Thesara, you wanted control of my council appointments. Solore wanted military access to our northern borders. Karth wanted trade concessions. They weren't offering daughters. They were offering hostages. Winona wants nothing except to survive what I've put her through. That makes her the only one I can trust. Trust is a luxury, Draven said. Kings need power. Kings need legitimacy. And according to the law, I have until the blood moon to wed. I've met that requirement. My choice of bride is mine to make. The law also states the king must act in the best interest of the realm, Draven countered. Marrying a kitchen girl is not in our interest. It's self-indulgence at the expense of the kingdom. Then call a vote, Seraphon said, his voice ringing with challenge. If the council believes I'm unfit, remove me. But do it legally, not through assassination and intimidation. Silence fell. The council members exchanged glances. What assassination? Lord Karth asked. His warrior's face creased with confusion. The bomb in the garden 3 weeks ago. The poisoned gifts sent to Winona's quarters. The hired assassin we caught in the palace kitchens. Seraphon fixed his gaze on Draven. Shall I continue? You have no proof I was involved in any of that, Draven said smoothly. I have enough, and so do most of the people in this room. Seraphon turned to address the council. Draven wants the throne. That's no secret, but he wants it through subterfuge and murder because he knows he can't take it legally. I've met every requirement of the succession law. I will wed before the blood moon. Whether you approve of my choice is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant if your choice destroys the court, Lady Thasara said. The noble houses are on the verge of revolt. Then let them revolt. I'll deal with them. Seraphon's voice was iron. But I won't be blackmailed into a political marriage to prevent a conflict you're all too cowardly to fight. I am your king. I've held this throne for 3 centuries, through wars and plagues and catastrophes you can't imagine. I've earned the right to choose my own bride. Even if that choice costs you everything? Draven asked softly. Even then. The council members were silent, weighing his words. Finally, Elder Mordain spoke. The oldest vampire in the court, he'd been ancient when Seraphon was turned. His voice was dry as old paper. The law is clear. The king must wed before the blood moon. The king's choice of bride is his own. If we override that choice, we set a precedent that will haunt us for centuries. He fixed Draven with a stare that could have melted stone. You're denied, Hale. The king stands. Relief washed through Seraphon, though he kept his expression neutral. Around the chamber, other council members were nodding. Not all of them, but enough. Draven's face went blank with fury. This is a mistake. It's the law, Elder Mordain said. If you dislike it, you're welcome to challenge the king in formal combat. Otherwise, accept his choice and move on. Oh, I'll move on, Draven said. He turned to Seraphon, and his smile was poisonous. But this isn't over, cousin, not by far. He swept from the chamber, several council members following in his wake. Seraphon watched him go, knowing the real battle was just beginning. He returned to the secure quarters to find Winona pacing, her face pale with worry. She spun when he entered, relief flooding her features. You're back. I thought... She couldn't seem to finish the sentence. I'm here, and I'm still king, for now. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. She fit there perfectly, her head tucked under his chin. Draven failed. But he's not done. No, he's not. He held her tighter. I'm sorry. I keep putting you in danger. Stop apologizing. I chose this, remember? You chose before you knew what it would cost. Then let me choose again. She pulled back to look at him. I'm staying. I'm marrying you. Not because of the law or the throne or any of it. Because of you. Because somewhere in this absolute chaos, I fell for the vampire king who's too stubborn to accept political compromise. His chest tightened with emotion he didn't have words for. You're certain? I'm terrified. But I'm certain. He kissed her, pouring 600 years of loneliness and longing into the connection. She kissed him back, fierce and unafraid, and for the first time since this had all begun, he felt something like hope. The blood moon rose in 3 days. They had that long to prepare. The wedding preparations consumed the palace. Despite the political tensions, protocol demanded spectacle. This was a royal wedding, and the eyes of every vampire in the kingdom would be watching. Seraphon wanted small and private. The council demanded grand and public. They compromised on elaborate but secure. Winona stood for fitting after fitting, her body draped in fabrics that cost more than her childhood home. Varel managed the process with military precision, transforming the kitchen girl into someone who could stand beside a king. "You look beautiful," Varel said, adjusting the final dress. It was deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that suggested starlight. The color made Winona's skin glow, brought out depths in her dark eyes. "His Majesty will be speechless. Or he'll laugh at how ridiculous this all is," Winona said, but she smiled. Somewhere along the way, Varel had become a friend, one of the few she had in this strange world. "He won't laugh. He's been different since you arrived. Lighter." Varel's ancient eyes were kind. "You're good for him." "I hope so, because I'm way too deep in this to back out now." The night before the wedding, Seraphon came to her quarters. He looked exhausted, the weight of the past month showing in the tightness around his eyes. But when he saw her, his expression eased. "I needed to see you," he said simply. "Bad day?" "Long day. Draven's been quiet, which is somehow worse than his attacks. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." He collapsed onto the sofa with uncharacteristic gracelessness. "Tell me I'm doing the right thing. Tell me I'm not ruining both our lives." She sat beside him, taking his hand. "You're doing the right thing." "How can you be sure?" "Because whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. That's better than facing it alone." He turned to her, and there was wonder in his eyes. "How did I find you? How did you walk into my life at exactly the moment I needed you most? Terrible luck and a slippery floor?" He laughed, the sound genuine. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. She realized she'd been waiting to hear them, had been carrying her own confession for days without quite knowing it. "I love you too," she said. Which is completely insane given the circumstances. But there it is. He kissed her slowly, tenderly, like they had all the time in the world instead of a single night before everything changed. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow you become my queen, and then nothing can tear us apart. Promise?" "I promise." The blood moon rose red and ominous over the underground city. Magic made the sky visible even this far below the earth, projecting the heavens onto the vast cavern ceiling. Winona watched it from her preparation chambers, her stomach tight with nerves. This was it, the night that would determine everything. The wedding ceremony took place in the grand hall, transformed for the occasion into something from a Gothic fairy tale. Black candles burned with silver flames. White flowers climbed every column. The assembled guests filled the space with rustling silk and whispered conversations, vampire nobility mixing with the few human allies Seraphon maintained. Winona walked down the aisle alone. She'd had no family to give her away, and she'd refused Seraphon's offer to have someone stand in. She would walk to him on her own terms. He waited at the altar, dressed in formal regalia that made him look every inch the king he was. His white hair was bound back, his pale face regal and composed. But when he saw her, when their eyes met across the distance, his expression softened into something private and real. She reached the altar. He took her hands, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. The ceremony was ancient, the words older than kingdoms. Lord Calum officiated, his voice carrying through the hall. Winona barely heard the formal passages. She was focused on Seraphon, on the warmth in his eyes despite the coolness of his skin, on the future they were building together against impossible odds. "Do you, Seraphon Havel, king of the eternal court, take this woman as your consort, to stand beside you in power and in darkness until time itself ceases?" "I do," Seraphon said clearly. "Do you, Winona Zahar, accept the crown and the burden, the power and the responsibility to stand as consort to the king until time itself ceases?" Winona took a breath. This was the moment. The point of no return. She looked at Seraphon and saw her future in his eyes, complicated and dangerous and absolutely worth fighting for. "I do," she said. "Then by the ancient law and the blood moon above, I pronounce you bound. Long may you reign." Seraphon pulled her in and kissed her, and the hall erupted in applause. Not all of it was genuine. Winona could see the sour expressions on some faces, the calculation in others. But many were cheering, and that was enough. They turned to face the court as king and consort, united. The reception was held in the ballroom, a glittering affair of music and dancing and political maneuvering disguised as celebration. Winona navigated conversations with nobles who barely concealed their disdain, smiled until her face ached, and tried to remember all the protocols Seraphon had drilled into her. He never left her side. His hand stayed at the small of her back, his presence a constant reassurance. They moved through the crowd together, a unit, and gradually Winona felt her confidence grow. She was doing this. She was surviving. "You're magnificent," Seraphon murmured during a brief moment of privacy. "Every inch a queen." "I'm faking it very well." "That's all any of us do, but you're doing it better than most." Lady Thessera approached, her expression neutral. "Your Majesties, congratulations on your union." "Thank you, Lady Thessera," Winona said carefully, remembering the coaching. Polite but not warm. Acknowledgement without invitation. "I hope you'll forgive the noble houses for our initial resistance," Thessera continued. "Change is always difficult. But seeing you tonight, I believe I understand His Majesty's choice. You have strength." It was the closest thing to an apology Winona would get, and she recognized the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you. I hope to prove worthy of the crown." "I'm sure you will." Thessera inclined her head and withdrew. "That was a victory," Seraphon said quietly. "If Thessera is willing to make peace, others will follow. Or it was a trap. Always possible. But I choose optimism tonight." They danced. Winona had practiced the formal steps until she could perform them in her sleep, and it paid off now. She moved through the patterns with Seraphon, their bodies perfectly synchronized, and felt the eyes of the court watching. Let them watch. She had nothing to hide. The blood moon reached its zenith. Midnight approached. By ancient law, the marriage needed to be consummated before the moon set to be considered binding. It was an archaic requirement, but one they couldn't ignore. Seraphon led her from the ballroom, through corridors lined with guards, to the royal chambers. The rooms were vast and sumptuous, designed for a king who'd ruled centuries. But tonight they felt intimate, a refuge from the political storm outside. He closed the door, and they were finally, blessedly alone. "We made it," Winona said. "We did, though the hard part starts now. I thought the hard part was surviving assassination attempts and hostile nobles. That too." He crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. "But I meant the hard part of actually building a life together, of figuring out how to make this work. One day at a time?" "One day at a time," he agreed. Then, softer, "Are you afraid?" "Terrified. But not of you." "Good, because I would never hurt you, not intentionally." He kissed her forehead, tender. "And what comes next is your choice. The law requires we share a bed tonight, but it doesn't specify what we do in that bed. If you want to just sleep, we'll sleep." She considered that, considered the proper thing, the careful thing. Then she thought about how short life was, how uncertain their future, how much she wanted him despite the impossibility of it all. "I don't want to just sleep," she said. Heat flared in his eyes. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain of you. That's enough." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and she felt the last of her reservations burn away. They'd come together out of necessity, but what they'd built was real. And tonight, under the blood moon, she would claim her vampire king as thoroughly as he'd claimed her. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the wonder of new discovery. His skin was cool but warmed under her touch. His strength was inhuman, but he wielded it with such gentleness she felt cherished rather than fragile. And when they finally came together, fully and completely, Winona felt something shift inside her. A lock turning, a door opening to possibilities she'd never imagined. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I love you. Not the political alliance, not the solution to my succession crisis. You, Winona. I love you too," she whispered. "My impossible vampire king." They drifted towards sleep as the blood moon began its descent. Outside, the court was still celebrating. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles to fight. But tonight, in the darkness of the royal chambers, they had won. They had each other, and that was enough. The first crisis came 3 days after the wedding. Winona woke to shouting, to the clash of steel, to Seraphon leaping from the bed with vampiric speed. He'd barely pulled on trousers when guards burst through the door. "Your Majesty, we're under attack. Draven's forces have breached the palace." Seraphon's expression went cold and hard. "How many?" "50 at least. They're fighting toward the throne room." "Ambitious." He turned to Winona. "Stay here. Barricade the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "I'm not hiding while you fight." "Winona. I'm your queen now. Where you go, I go." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. "Fine, but stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" She nodded. He armed himself with a sword that looked like it had survived several wars, then led her out into chaos. The palace was a battleground. Draven's forces, all vampire warriors loyal to the old ways, were carving through the guards with brutal efficiency. Seraphon met them with equal violence, his sword a silver blur, his movements too fast to track. Winona stayed close, unarmed but unwilling to be left behind. They fought through corridors slick with blood, toward the throne room where Draven would be making his stand. This was it. The final confrontation, the moment that would determine the future of the Eternal Court. The throne room doors were shattered. Inside, Draven stood on the dais, his own supporters arrayed around him. He'd taken the throne, a deliberate insult. When Seraphon entered, Draven smiled. "Cousin, I was wondering when you'd arrive." "Get off my throne, Draven. Make me, or better yet, let's settle this the old way. Single combat. Winner takes the crown." Seraphon's grip tightened on his sword. "You're challenging me formally?" "I am. Right of blood, witnessed by the court. You win, I submit. I win, you abdicate." Draven's gaze slid to Winona. "And your charming bride becomes a widow, or whatever the vampire equivalent is." "Accept," Winona said, before Seraphon could respond. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stepped forward, chin high. "He accepts your challenge, Draven, and when my husband defeats you, you'll spend the rest of your immortal life regretting this moment." Draven laughed. "Such spirit. I'll almost be sorry to kill her." "You won't touch her," Seraphon said quietly. "I'll make sure of that." The combat was brutal and swift. Draven was strong, ancient, skilled, but Seraphon had 300 years of ruling behind him, 300 years of fighting to keep the throne against challengers just like this one. He met Draven's attacks with practiced ease, countering every strike, every feint, every attempt to break through his guard. They fought across the throne room, their swords ringing like bells, their movements inhuman. Winona watched with her heart in her throat, seeing how close each blow came to ending everything. But Seraphon was better. Faster, smarter, more experienced. He drove Draven back, step by step, until the challenger's back was against the wall. "Yield!" Seraphon commanded. "Never!" "Then die." The final strike was clean. Seraphon's sword pierced Draven's heart, the only sure way to kill a vampire. Draven gasped, his expression shocked, and then crumbled to ash. Silence fell. The rebels laid down their weapons. It was over. Seraphon turned to face the court, his sword still drawn, his white hair wild around his face. Anyone else want to challenge my right to rule? No one spoke. They wouldn't. Not after this. Seraphon had proven his strength, had defended his crown in the oldest way their kind recognized. He was king by right of blood and conquest now, not just law. He sheathed his sword and walked to Winona, pulling her into his arms despite the watching crowd. Are you all right? I'm fine. You were magnificent. I was terrified I'd lose and leave you alone. You didn't lose. We won. She pulled back to look at him. Together. He kissed her in front of the entire court, a claim and a promise wrapped in one gesture. The aftermath was complex. Draven's supporters were exiled or imprisoned, their lands and titles stripped. The noble houses that had wavered in their support fell over themselves to pledge loyalty. And Winona, who'd started this journey as a kitchen girl no one noticed, found herself respected. Not feared, not obeyed out of obligation, but genuinely respected. She proved herself worthy not through bloodline or power, but through something more valuable. She made Seraphon happy, made him laugh, made him think, made him want to be better. The court saw that, and slowly, grudgingly, they accepted her. Lady Thessara became an unlikely ally, teaching Winona the subtleties of vampire politics that Seraphon glossed over. Lord Valen's merchant house opened trade opportunities she turned into prosperity for the kingdom. Even Elder Mordain, ancient and stern, admitted she had exceeded his expectations. 6 months after the blood moon wedding, Winona stood on a balcony overlooking the underground city, watching artificial light simulate dawn. Seraphon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How strange life is. How I went from nobody to queen, from invisible to essential, all because I slipped on a wet floor. Best accident in history. For you, maybe. I'm still deciding." He spun her around, mock outrage on his face. "Still deciding, after everything?" "Well, you do snore," she teased. "Vampires don't snore. Could have fooled me." He kissed her to silence her laughter, and she melted into him, still marveling at how perfectly they fit. This impossible thing they'd built together, this love born of necessity and grown into something unshakable. "I have a question," she said when they broke apart. "Anything." "The turning. We've never really talked about it again, but I've been thinking. If I became vampire..." His expression went very still. "Are you saying you want that?" "I'm saying I want time, as much time as possible with you. If that means becoming vampire, then yes. I want that." "You're certain? It's irreversible. You'd lose the sun, the aging process, everything human. I'd gain eternity with you. That seems like a fair trade." She touched his face, felt the coolness of his skin that no longer seemed strange. "Turn me. Make me what you are. Let's have forever." The joy that flooded his features was blinding. "When?" "Whenever you're ready. I've been ready since the moment I met you." The turning ceremony happened under another blood moon, exactly 1 year after their wedding. It was a private affair, just Winona, Seraphon, and Elder Mordain as witness. The old vampire explained the process with clinical detachment, but Winona saw the approval in his ancient eyes. "This is your choice," he said to her. "Your final choice as a human. Once you cross this threshold, there is no return." "I understand." "Then may you find peace in immortality." The turning itself was pain and ecstasy wrapped together. Seraphon's bite, draining her blood until she stood at the edge of death. His blood in return, burning through her veins like liquid fire, rewriting her from the inside out. She felt her heart slow, felt her body change, felt something fundamental shift. When it was done, she opened eyes that saw in perfect darkness. Her senses had sharpened to supernatural levels. She felt strong, powerful, eternal. And when she looked at Seraphon, she saw him with new eyes. Saw the depth of his love written in every line of his face, felt the connection between them strengthened beyond anything human. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I could fight an army." "Good, because ruling this kingdom requires it." He pulled her close. "Welcome to immortality, my queen." She kissed him, tasting her new nature, reveling in the power singing through her veins. "Let's make it interesting." They had centuries to learn each other, to build a kingdom, to face whatever challenges immortality would bring. But they would face it together. King and queen, vampire and vampire, partners in every sense. The court flourished under their joint rule. Seraphon handled military matters and long-term strategy. Winona focused on the welfare of both vampire and human subjects, on building bridges between their worlds, on ensuring the underground city was a place of prosperity rather than just power. They made mistakes, stumbled, argued over policy and philosophy, but they always came back to each other, to the love that had started with blood on a cold throne and grown into something unbreakable. Years passed, decades. The world above changed, and they adapted with it. But the core of the Eternal Court remained stable, ruled by the vampire king who'd rejected 1,000 brides and the poor girl who'd bled on his throne and stolen his heart. 5 years after her turning, Winona stood in the throne room during a formal reception, watching Seraphon navigate some tedious diplomatic crisis with practiced ease. He caught her eye across the crowd and winked, breaking character just enough to make her smile. Later, when the guests had departed and they were alone again, she asked him something that had been on her mind. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing me over a political marriage?" "Never, not once." He pulled her onto his lap on that same obsidian throne where it had all begun. "You saved me, Winona, from centuries of loneliness, from becoming as cold as this throne, from losing sight of why I fought to keep it. You reminded me what I was fighting for. And what's that? This. Us. A world where a kitchen girl can become queen, where love matters more than bloodlines, where even immortals can still grow." He kissed her softly. "You're my greatest accomplishment. Not the kingdom, not the throne, not 300 years of rule. You." She felt tears prick her eyes, a vestigial human response her vampire body still occasionally produced. "I love you. I love you too. Forever. Literally forever now. Best kind of forever." They sat together on the throne, king and queen, watching artificial starlight play across the cavern ceiling. Somewhere above them, the human world continued its rush toward the future. Down here, in the depths, they had time, all the time in the world, and they would use it well. The years stretched into decades, the decades into centuries. The Eternal Court thrived under their rule, becoming a model of vampire-human cooperation that other kingdoms struggled to match. Winona proved to be a brilliant administrator, her human perspective combined with vampire power, creating innovative solutions to age-old problems. They traveled the world, visiting other vampire courts, building alliances, strengthening the bonds that kept their kind safe in an increasingly technological human world. They saw wonders and weathered crises, always together, always united. And when they returned to Nethermere, to the palace carved from stone beneath London, they always ended up back in that throne room. Standing on the dais where blood had once spilled and destiny had been written. "Do you remember?" Seraphon asked one quiet evening, running his hand over the armrest where her blood had fallen so long ago. "Every moment," Winona said. "Best accident of my life. Mine too." They had forever ahead of them. Challenges to face, adventures to pursue, a kingdom to nurture. But they would face it all together, the vampire king and the queen who'd started as nobody, bound by love stronger than any ancient law. The blood moon rose again, as it did each year, and they stood together watching its crimson light paint the underground city in shades of memory and promise. The future stretched ahead, eternal and uncertain, but they would walk into it hand in hand. Forever, as it turned out, was exactly long enough.